I thought, in that previous conversation, the two of us were kind of trying to have kind of a
We're not
high
live.
level discussion,
We're not.
and maybe some other parties that might have been in the stream were continuing to interrupt and kind of distract from that
Grayson,
conversation.
we're,
So I thought
we're
maybe
not
it's
live,
better,
man.
huh? Oh, I thought maybe it's better to have like a one-on-one discussion. I think was probably like the mutual feeling here. So we wanted to kind of retouch on some of those ideas. And so yeah, I'll just kind of let Sam introduce himself and take it away.
Yeah, sorry, but I didn't refresh, and so I was trying to say, "Hey, we're not live." But yeah, my name's Sam. I think most of your fans are also my fans. But yeah, no. So we tried to join. We've had conversations a little bit in the chat, and I tried to join your stream and talk about it, but there was a lot going on, and I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to compete. So basically, where I believe the disagreement is, if I lose my signal a little bit, then I might just shut my camera off. But
Okay. That's fine.
so when it comes to any fact, okay, and that fact would be the fact of like the geological column, for example. Those facts are going to be interpreted based on one's worldview. And so this is something that we should disagree on. Or this is something that we should agree on.
Yeah.
And so that's
I
how
will
we're
agree
gonna
with that. And I think I re-listened to our previous conversation, and I think that one thing maybe that I think maybe was deserving clarification was you kept accusing me of begging the question. And so I wanted to make sure, like, are you saying that my inclination towards a naturalist worldview, where I would look at evidence and I would look for a natural explanation for them, is that where what you're talking about with my interpretation, my worldview of interpretation of the evidence?
Yeah, if you don't mind, let me just unpack it for like a minute,
Okay.
and then and maybe I'll clarify that question. Okay, so you can have, it's almost like two paradigms, so for example, we kind of use and I don't like using analogies because they can get ripped apart pretty easily. But let's say, in astronomy, somebody might hold to a steady state theory, and somebody might hold to a Big Bang theory. And so we can say, for this analogy, those would be their starting presuppositions, and they would be interpreting the data accordingly. So they might both look and see a red shift. So they see this fact that is a red shift, but they might interpret that red shift differently. Someone might say, well, I'm interpreting this red shift as an expansion, which that would be the consensus opinion. However, somebody might say, well, no, I'm going to interpret this red shift differently, which there are people that interpret that red shift differently. It isn't necessarily an expansion. So you have the fact of the red shift being interpreted by one's worldview. Okay.
Okay.
So and we would agree on this. Hopefully, if you don't agree yet, it's just because maybe you're not understanding what I'm saying. But this isn't something that's really controversial.
No, I'm with you so far. The only comment that I would have to say about that is that the evidence, right, the evidence that is available can be more in line with one interpretation versus the other. Like I would say that in that example, the current preponderance of the evidence, like the totality of the evidence that we have available to us to make the decision, is in favor of one interpretation, namely the expansion model, versus the other, the steady state. So even though we can look at how we would interpret the evidence given a steady state assumption, given a steady state worldview, the evidence is clearly in line with one interpretation over the other. Not all interpretations are equal. That's the only comment that I would have so far.
So in the context of a worldview, the comment you just made would be arbitrary. And so I would go one step further. Okay. I would say, in the context of a worldview, all of your evidence is going to be in alignment with your worldview because you're interpreting it that way. Right? So
I don't know if
everything is evidence of interpretation A, and somebody else might say, well, I believe everything is an evidence of interpretation B, or maybe they would say not A, depending on how we're going to look at it.
Sure.
Okay.
But I don't think that those two interpretations are of equal value. So to give an example here,
But that's
like,
but what
wait, can I give an example real quick just to clarify what I'm talking about? Like if the evidence that we are both looking at, say somebody like drops an apple in front of us and we both watch the apple fall, then if my interpretation is to say um, that was because of gravity, and here are the testable predictions for if that's the case, here are the equations, here are the formulas that predict mathematically what we should observe. And then the other person's explanation next to me is that no, actually, I think that those are invisible fairies that are pulling down the apple. And really, all of the observations are in line with that. You can't disprove that there are some kind of intangible, invisible fairies that are pulling down things instead of gravity.
yeah.
And clearly, like, I can't falsify that with the evidence. The evidence shows gravity, right? And they can accommodate that, like, they can accommodate all the evidence in the invisible fairy worldview. But that doesn't mean that they're actually making testable, verifiable predictions. And that doesn't mean that the empirical evidence suggests that there are invisible dark fairies just because it can be accommodated by that worldview.
I
I would
try
say
to
that
be brief.
clearly in that example, those two interpretations are not of equal value.
Okay. So I get what you're trying to do with the invisible fairy. Okay. And that's cute, but that's not going to work because, I can make comments like that too and point out, depending on the worldview, maybe those invisible fairies would be these non-physical laws that are governing the physical creation if they can't be accounted for, right? So maybe that would be the invisible fairy. The problem with what you're saying is if we're going to be more intellectually honest, Newton had certain equations that Einstein corrected, right? So to say that, well, I have this conclusion in science and it's definitive, well, that's pseudoscience. Okay, because all
No,
conclusions.
okay, hold on.
Hold on. I let you go. Let's be
Okay.
charitable. Okay, conclusions in science are provisional. And the reason why you shouldn't disagree with this is because Darwin challenged the consensus. Darwin viewed the geological column through a
Okay.
naturalistic
Can we
lens.
just hold on now?
Let me finish my thought.
I know, but you've made your point that scientific knowledge is provisional, and I agree with that.
Okay.
Like, you don't have to go through this. I already agree that scientific knowledge is provisional. It's based on the currently available evidence, and all scientific conclusions and scientific knowledge in general is provisional because it is always subject to change based on new evidence that could come out in the future. Like, no scientific knowledge claims is going to be like 100% certainty. Like, you can have, oh, I'm 99% certain about this, but none of these claims are going to be absolutes. They're all going to be provisional.
Yeah. So to suggest that, one person has, and I agree that there is a sense where, if somebody's coming along and they're just like maybe too fringe. I get that. Okay. But in the context of a worldview, everything is going to be interpreted from those starting presuppositions. So for you to say, well, I have a naturalistic worldview and I interpret the data this way, and for these reasons, I think that it's best and everything is best explained within my model. If we're going to be honest with each other, then I can jump in your model and I could say, okay, I see why you would say that. That would make sense. But on the other hand, you would be doing the same thing from an internal critique, or what's called a reductio ad absurdum, where you would accept your opponent's position for the sake of argument, even though you disagree, and you would jump in and see if you can if everything is internally consistent. Okay. So over here on this other model, as a biblical creationist, we have a worldview, we have those starting presuppositions. And the reason why these are important to understand this, because like you're a smart guy, but sometimes you say stuff that just kind of misses this whole point. The foundation of science is philosophical at the most root level, unless you want to say that like rocks talk. That would be a reification fallacy. That's not the case. At the most fundamental level, there are starting presuppositions. So I can grant you your entire worldview. Okay. So at this point, let me hold on 1 second. I just had all this leftover corned beef and cabbage from last night, and I'm not. so so at this point, like I understand that you're used to debating over the interpretation of the data, right? And you're good at it. You do a really good job with it. You know, you do that with Donny. You guys debate, say, hey, there's this fact, and I have reasons why I should interpret it this way. And he's like, well, no, I have reasons why I should interpret it that way. I'm coming at it at a deeper level. Okay. I'm granting you your interpretation of the data. I'm saying you have a naturalistic worldview. Okay. And in your worldview, you're not allowing for any non-naturalistic interpretation of the data. Okay. So I can be an atheist now and an evolutionist asking you these questions. So at a fundamental level, the implications of your worldview, what it entails, like if I say my favorite color is red, the entailment is that it's not blue, it's not green. Does that make sense? Do you agree with me? If I affirm my favorite color is red, I have explicitly said my favorite color is red.
Yeah,
but I've also implied that it's not blue.
Yeah.
And I've also implied that it's not green. Okay.
Sure.
So you have a naturalistic interpretation, and the implications of your worldview interpretation of the data is that there is no God.
I don't know if I would necessarily concede that. I would need more justification for like making that logical, like A to B to C, like reasoning there to lead to that conclusion. But before you respond, because you brought up a number of points there, you talked for a bit, so I just want to be able to respond to some of the things that you brought up. You were saying that like in order to analyze different worldviews, it's best to analyze them for like internal consistency given their own like kind of like stepping into their shoes and analyzing it from the context and the presuppositions of that worldview, and making sure that it's internally consistent. But I would just say that whether or not a framework or a worldview is internally consistent doesn't really have any bearing on whether or not it's true. So, for example, we can come up with mathematical models that are completely internally consistent, but like involve multiple dimensions, like 50 dimensions of space and time and all kinds of crazy stuff that have no bearing on reality or like what's actually true. But we can make math that is internally consistent and there's nothing wrong with it mathematically. It's just not describing reality. So whether or not something's internally consistent doesn't have a bearing on whether or not it's true. And then
that would apply to you, right?
Wait, hold on 1 second, because there was just one more point that I wanted to address that you had brought up, which you were basically saying that like having like a naturalistic worldview precludes God. I don't know if I would go that far, but I would say like there's evidence, right? Like I would say that my worldview is defined like by like kind of like the knowledge statements that I would be able to make, like my epistemology would be like from empirical evidence. So empiricism, which I guess you could say is like a philosophical underpinning of science or whatever.
No,
and then also like logical reason and like rationalism. So like there's a combination of those two things are how we can have knowledge through objective reasoning and empirical evidence. And through empirical evidence, at least, all we have is examples of supernatural things. I have yet to see any evidence for the supernatural. So hence, I think it's logical to have a naturalistic framework because I have no evidence that a supernatural explanation is even possible. So it's evidence-based. I'm relying on empiricism.
Yeah. Let's address that, and we'll try to be brief. So like right away, like if you look at Zach Hancock in the chat, right? He says that I'm attacking the philosophy of science. And so Zach is, not to be rude, he's just ignorant of what we're talking about right now. Because the philosophy of science, as you brought up empiricism, you know, there are different philosophies of science. So no one's attacking it. I'm approaching it from a different philosophy. So, for example, empiricism has been refuted. If the statement that everything needs to be empirically verified, how have you empirically verified that statement?
Well, it's rational, I think.
Well,
So
that's
there's
arbitrary. But
well,
see,
I said that the
that's my point.
combination of my
It's
worldview was from rationalism and empiricism. So I think that with the two of
but
those,
Grayson, hold
I
on.
can make like knowledge claims that I'm not claiming are 100% objective universal knowledge, but I think are as close as we can get to such things.
Yeah, you're just saying you have an opinion though. And that's entirely arbitrary. No, so look, here's I'm not trying to be rude. We agree on this, okay? To say that everything needs to be empirically verified would include the statement that everything needs to be empirically verified. It doesn't work. Empiricism was a philosophy that is no longer valid. And ironically, Andrew Cumming, the rational empiricist, those are two antithetical thoughts at a fundamental level. On one hand, you have empiricism, which is to say that like physical things empirically very. Rationalism is the opposite. Things would become to a rational conclusion first. That would be primary. The rationalist would say that that is primary. The empiricism would say that empiricism is primary. So at a fundamental, and I'm not saying that those aren't good things, but at a fundamental level, those are antithetical philosophies, okay? And so, but again, you're missing the point here. I'm granting you your worldview. I'm granting you your interpretation of the facts for this conversation, okay? But when you make a statement, I'm going to challenge you to defend it. So one of the things that you said was that you have no evidence of the supernatural, right? But in order for that statement to be true, then you're going to need to show me how everything, the plant in your yard, the man in the mirror, is not evidence of God. And so, because you appealed to empiricism, I mean, did you put those things in a beaker and determine that God was not the causal origin of those things? Because if you haven't done that, then you can't defend that there's no evidence of God. And you've contradicted yourself now with your appeal to empiricism.
No, you're saying that the lack of evidence falsifying God means that I cannot make a claim that there's a lack of evidence supporting God, which are
No,
totally different things.
not what I
But
said
really
at all.
quickly, I just want to make, because you brought up again multiple points. So the first point that I just want to address is rationalism and empiricism may be different approaches, but that
Right.
doesn't mean that they're incompatible. I see no logical rationale as to why these approaches cannot be used in combination with each other and why they would be mutually exclusive or incompatible. Lots of philosophers and
I'll
scientists, to my
explain
knowledge,
that.
use combinations of rationalism and empiricism, and there's no conflict between the two. So I would need you to justify that more.
Yeah. So for example, an empiricism would be maybe something makes sense, but you can't quite prove it. So an example, and again, I don't like using examples, okay, because now you want to, now you want to attack the example. Abiogenesis would be an example of that. Have you empirically demonstrated the causal origin of the universe? Have you empirically demonstrated the Big Bang or life from non-life?
But
You
that's
haven't.
just
You have hold
God
on.
of the gaps. That's not evidence.
You have a philosophy of how those things can happen. Now, fundamentally, that's rationalism. So we'll say.
Wait,
We'll
wait,
grant you that.
Sam,
You
Sam.
no,
I just
no,
want to
no, no,
say,
no,
like,
no, no. You need to.
I just
Grayson,
want to say that I just want to say that you're
finish.
just bringing up gaps in our knowledge, and that
No,
is
I'm
not
not.
evidence of supernaturalism.
Okay. Grayson, listen. And that's why I said that I don't like bringing up examples, because when I bring up an example, you're coming over here on my example, but I'm only using the example to make a point. Like, you need to stay on the point.
Okay.
At a philosophical fundamental level, rationalism and empiricism are in competition. Okay. You have a rational look, I'm going to explain it.
Okay.
This isn't something that you should be arguing with.
I'm letting you explain it.
This isn't like this. This is something that we agree on. Okay.
I don't agree with you though.
Well, you talk to an atheist philosopher of science, and he's not going to disagree with me.
No, I'm agreeing that they're different approaches, but they're not fundamentally in conflict with each other.
Well, I'm explaining to you why they are, because on one hand, you want to put that empiricism is the most, when we're talking about fundamental, there isn't a lower level, right? This is your final reference point. This is it. You're like up here saying, well, these things aren't in competition up here at a higher level. Well, that's debatable. I'm talking about a most fundamental level.
But at the fundamental level, you're going to need at the fundamental level for every single worldview are your axiomatic presuppositions for mine and yours. That's what's at the fundamental level, is that you just get to the bedrock of axiomatic presuppositions. Like you have to presuppose on the reliability of your own sensory information.
Well, I don't want to move off. I don't want to move off this just yet. I think we're putting too many things.
Okay, you said that we were missing the point with all of the examples and we were getting bogged down. So I'll let you try to like get at the point.
Okay. At a most fundamental level, you're going to need to decide either rationalism, and this is a bifurcation fallacy. I realize that, but you brought up two things: rationalism and empiricism. And although there are different trains of thought, different philosophies, we're going to go with the two that you brought up. Okay. So at a most fundamental level, either abiogenesis is going to be dismissed because it hasn't been demonstrated, or you're going to affirm it because of rationalism. You're going to dismiss it because of empiricism. It has not been empirically demonstrated.
It has.
No, Grayson.
Yeah. So
there's no. Hold on.
I can explain that if you want me to.
No. I know what you're trying to say. You're going to say that we have all of these steps.
No, that's not what I'm going to say. That's not what I'm going to say.
So you can show me life.
Let me make my point. You'll hear it. My point is that we can have unknowns about the mechanism of abiogenesis, but we can still know that abiogenesis happened.
It's not what I'm talking about. You're missing this.
That's what I'm talking about.
Look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I am talking about at a fundamental level, you have invoked two things that are simultaneously incompatible at a fundamental level.
But explain why.
Who won the Nobel Prize for making life from non-life? Where's that been done? Do you have a paper?
Why do you keep bringing up abiogenesis? You keep saying that our examples are distracting from the point. And every time I address your abiogenesis claims, you want to bring it back to the more general case. But every time you try to make the general case, you keep bringing up abiogenesis.
Grayson, when you interrupt me, I'm stopping because I don't want to have like a combative conversation.
Okay.
But you're not letting me finish my thought.
Okay, I'll let you finish.
I think if you let me finish my thought, then it would bring a lot of clarity.
Okay.
I don't care about abiogenesis. I'm granting that you have a worldview that would include life for non-life. Although it has not been empirically demonstrated, see, that's one hand. You have a rational justification for believing it. So if you're going to say the foundation of my worldview is empiricism, then you have a problem because it hasn't been empirically demonstrated. So now you're going to pivot over to rationalism. You're saying I have a rational justification for believing it, and that's fine. But at a fundamental level, both of those things are incompatible.
Why?
I just explained it.
You didn't, though.
No, I did.
Why does that make it? I don't understand why they're incompatible. Why can't my worldview is constructed from both of them. Neither is like primary. By the foundation of my worldview, the same as everyone's foundation, are axiomatic presuppositions. That's the foundation. It's not like there's
We're gonna move on.
Okay,
we can
move on.
Okay. Rationalism and empiricism are different things entirely. And you can,
they're different approaches, but they're not incompatible. And you haven't demonstrated that they are.
Fundamental level, at a fundamental level, you can't appeal to both.
Yeah, why
This isn't
not?
controversial, but let's move on. Now you said that there's no evidence of God, right? But in order for that to be true, then you're going to need to explain to me how you determined that everything isn't evidence of God. Okay. So, in order for your statement to be true, my worldview would necessarily need to be false. On my worldview, God created everything. So, everything stands in a causal relation to God, including you, including your smile. Okay. So all of those things would be evidence. There it is. All of those things would be evidence of God, right? Like you would be evidence of God. And all my fans that love me in chat, okay? But you're saying that's not the case. And I'm
You
like,
do
whoa,
have
wait a
fans
minute.
that love you in chat.
I'm saying, well, wait a minute, Grayson. Like you've made a claim now. You've made a counterclaim that you've implied, just like, affirming red means that it's not blue. Okay. Your claim it entails that my worldview, that's the counterclaim, is false. And so I'm wondering, for you to defend that there is no evidence of God, how did you do that? How did you determine that the plant in the yard and the man in the mirror is not evidence of God?
Well, I don't see how it would be evidence for God. Maybe if there was like a rational or an empirical basis as to why
Which one?
literally the sum totality of everything was evidentiary support for God, then I'm open to being convinced of that. But I don't know what would be the compelling argument for that.
But you just begged the question.
How?
Because you just assumed the very thing that I asked you to prove.
How?
Because I'm asking you how you determined that everything isn't evidence of God. And you're just saying, well, I didn't, but I just think, I have an opinion.
Oh, okay. So this is like the concept of like a null hypothesis, right? It's like innocent until proven guilty, or you hold the null hypothesis until you have enough evidence to support the hypothesis. So if the hypothesis, the claim is that like God exists, then like I need evidence to support that claim. So if you're claiming that everything is
No.
evidence, I just need to
Yeah.
hear your argument justifying why everything is evidence
But
for.
look, that's a fair question, and I'm totally prepared to answer that. Okay. But what your response is an argument from ignorance. That's what it's called. It's a logical fallacy. It's a philosophical fallacious line of reasoning. And the reason why is because I can be an atheist asking you this question. I can be a note stuck to the refrigerator. Okay.
Okay.
Your claim entails that there is no God. It entails that the revelation of God is false. It entails that everything is, in fact, not evidence of God. So for you to say, well, you need to prove something, it's an argument from ignorance. Your worldview becomes true when you prove it. Your worldview doesn't become true because you've disproven some other worldview.
Right. So I'll just quote you back to yourself. Your
I'm the
worldview becomes
atheist, remember?
true when you prove it.
Yeah, and I said I'm prepared to do that.
Okay.
But
So
until
I'm
but
prepared to listen to the proof. I mean,
yeah, well,
I'll have an open mind, but like I said, I mean, I don't think that it's like starting with the presupposition that there is no God. If you start with the presupposition of just the null hypothesis of like, like the burden of proof
I've
is
already
on
addressed that,
those who
Grayson.
make the claim. I don't
I've
think
already
that
addressed
that
that.
presupposes that the claim is false. Like,
I've already addressed that.
but wait, but your point was
You're
that I'm
begging the
presupposing
question.
that God is not real. But I'm saying that like it's not presupposing that the claim is false to say that the burden of proof is on those making the claim. So you said you can do that, so I'm all ears.
Yeah. But that is an end. Like I said, I feel like, look, I love debating, like, or talking or having these conversations and arguing back and forth. But I think it would be good if you actually considered that what I'm saying, there might be some validity to it, because I feel like I've literally just addressed this too. Okay. I don't have to prove anything because you made a counterclaim. You made the claim implicitly that everything isn't evidence of God. And I just want to know how you did that. Like, how did you figure that out? And you appealed to empiricism. So, like, did you put all things that exist in a beaker and determine that they didn't derive from the mind of God? Because if you don't have an answer on, without attacking my position, if you can't explain to me how everything isn't evidence of God, then you can't defend your statement that there is no evidence of God. You've made a vacuous statement.
You're
And now,
trying to make it.
once you concede that your statement that there is no evidence of God is entirely vacuous and uninstantiated, then you can ask me over here on my side. So you have a worldview, you're on your side, your worldview needs to stand alone. Just like the screen we're looking at, your worldview is independent from mine. I may or may not have a rational justification for my worldview. Let's just assume that I don't, so you're not distracted. So now that my worldview is held irrationally and there is no God, and you're over there. Now, I just want to know, on your own terms, you made the counterclaim that there is no evidence of God, which would entail everything isn't evidence of God. And I want to know, how did you determine that?
Right. So you're trying to make it seem like I'm making a positive claim, right?
It doesn't matter if it's positive or you are making a counterclaim. When you open up and you breathe,
No, I have not made a
Yeah.
counterclaim. Like, my
you have
claim
made an
is that
implicit counterclaim, Grayson.
I'm not
Is
making
there
a claim
evidence of
about
God?
what the totality of the universe is evidence of. I'm not saying it's evidence of this or it's evidence of that. I'm not making a claim about
Yeah, you
what
are.
the evidence of the universe is of. Like,
Well, I'll explain again. I'll explain again clearly why you are. Okay,
but
why this is
you're
the
making
case.
the claim that you're not justifying, and I'm simply not making your claim. So in
Yeah.
order,
So
like, it's not that I'm making a counterclaim. I'm just not making yours.
okay, let me explain again why this is the case. Okay, when you look at our screen, you see two separate pictures. Those are worldviews, and that line in between that's an impassable gap. Okay, so you have a worldview and I have a worldview, and they're both antithetical. One of us is necessarily false. So, at a most fundamental level, you are making a claim. You are claiming that there is no evidence of God, which means over here on my side means my worldview is false. But in order for you to defend your counterclaim, your claim that there is no, you made a positive claim, right? That there's no evidence of God. You said that.
No, okay, let me modify my claim then. I will make a claim here. Okay? I'm not claiming there is no evidence of God. Here's the claim I will make for the record. Right now, currently,
Okay.
I do not have evidence for God, and I have not been presented compelling evidence for God. That is my claim. So now you can remedy that
Yeah.
by
Look,
addressing
look,
it
look, look,
and
look.
providing some.
Okay. That's cool. You just begged the question, and all you did is reiterate the exact same thing. It's a distinction with no difference. Okay. You can't defend that there's no evidence of God unless you can explain how nothing is evidence of God. Because over here on my side, I have a belief too, just like you. And over here, I have a belief that everything is evidence of God. Now, here's the problem, okay? So pay attention. Your position that I need to explain my rational justification, you are invoking a standard of criteria. You're saying, hey, Sam, in order for you to believe your worldview, there should be criteria that supports it, right? What's your evidence of God?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, Grayson, that's cool. Let's both rise to that standard. And so I have a worldview and it demands an instantiation. You have a worldview and it demands an instantiation. The problem is you are failing by your own criteria. That's the problem. You've not provided any evidence for your belief system. And this is what follows from that, okay? I'm granting you your worldview interpretation of the data. Evolution, millions of years, all of that crap. And I'm saying, Grayson, why should I believe that? Why should I embrace your worldview? And I'm being skeptical. Grayson, I don't have any. What evidence do you have, since you're invoking evidence?
Mm-hmm.
What empirical evidence do you have, or rational evidence? What do you have? Can you rise to your own standard and prove your worldview in the same way you would ask me over here to prove mine? Because one of us is wrong. And you're not giving me anything, but you're simultaneously asking me to rise to a standard that's apparently arbitrary, because you can't rise to it yourself. Now, I'll be happy to rise to it, just as soon as you concede that you have failed to justify your statement that there is no evidence of God. As soon as you do that, I will rise to that standard.
Well, as I already clarified, okay, I modified my statement to say I do not currently possess any evidence of God.
But you can't defend
I'm
that.
open to hearing it. I've asked you several times now, but I'll just say also that, like, the standards that you're talking about are like standards of evidence, standards of rationality, empiricism and rationality. That's what we've been talking about.
Jason, do you have a smile?
Yes.
Is that not evidence of God?
I don't see how I would need some kind of rational or empirical justification for that claim.
You don't have. Oh, wait. You do or you don't?
If you make a claim, then I think it's not too much for me to ask for either a rational or an empirical justification for that claim.
Awesome, dude. You're making a claim that your face isn't evidence of God. I want your rational or your empirical.
No, I'm not. If you're making the claim that it is, and I'm asking you for justification. My question doesn't mean that I'm making a counterclaim and I'm claiming the opposite of you. I'm just asking you, what is your justification?
Yeah. So let me. I mean, this is fine. When you go back and you listen to this, you're going to see that you're invoking a standard that you have failed to rise to. There is a line of delineation between our worldviews. You have a worldview. I'm granting it to you. I have a worldview. I don't know if you're granting it to me or not, but you should. Just that's how it's done. And so you're invoking a standard. We're both invoking the same standard. We both have a worldview. We both want evidence. You're invoking the standard of evidence, apparently arbitrarily. You haven't been able to rise to your standard. You haven't proven that there is no God. You haven't proven that your face is an evidence of God in the plant in front of your yard. You haven't proven that everything that you're acquainted with doesn't stand in some line of causal relation. You haven't shown to me that your worldview is true, so I have no obligation to even entertain your interpretation of the data. I have no obligation to even consider your naturalistic interpretation. I have no obligation to take seriously any of your claims that there is nothing supernatural. I have no obligation to take anything that you say seriously at all. But I do like when you guys debate. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. It's fun. But other than that, it's a vacuous worldview that you're speaking from. That unless you want to give me that line of reasoning, which you don't have, now that's clear, I'll be happy to provide a line of reasoning from my worldview. I'll be happy to rise to your apparently arbitrary standard, which is evidence. Okay.
I was going to respond to all that you just said, but I want to hear what you have to say now. I'll let you continue. Where is this justification? I'm eager.
So, and I'm going to give it to you, but let me give a little nuance first. Okay. There's a difference between proof and persuasion. Do you understand that?
Okay. Like, yeah, you can persuade somebody of something without offering actually sufficient proof. Sure.
Well, the opposite. Like I can prove, yeah, it would be no. We're good. Take a deep breath. We're going to agree on this.
I thought we were getting to the justification.
We're going to.
Okay.
But what's going to happen is you're going to start naysaying, which is fine, and you're welcome to do that.
But do you want me to mute myself so I won't?
Well, it's fine if you do. Look, I'm just having a conversation with you. I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to set traps. Like, Grayson, I genuinely want you to realize that your position is fundamentally vacuous and I want you to be reconciled with the God that you know. That's
That's
why I'm
sweet of
here.
you.
Okay. No, it's true. Like, people say, "Oh, I want a sign. Yeah, I want a sign from God." Well, I'm over here. I'm like, "Yo, Grayson, like, wake up, dude. Like, here it is."
All right, man. I feel like you're stalling right now.
All right.
I thought you were getting to this whole justification and all this.
Okay. So I mean, so I will. So, but just to be clear, like, there's a difference between proof and persuasion. You can prove to little Johnny in the classroom that 5 apples times 5 apples is 25 apples. Little Johnny might not be persuaded. People aren't persuaded of things. That doesn't matter. Okay. So my job is not to persuade you. But my job is just to provide you with the proof, hope that you consider it, hope that you repent and be reconciled to the God that you already know.
Okay.
And that's it, okay. So on the biblical worldview, and again, you're free to disagree, but if any disagreement, just at a fundamental level, you are making a counterclaim. When you say no, you are making a counterclaim, and just like with your face, you're going to need to defend that, and you haven't been able to do that. So that's why I wanted to get this out of the way. On the biblical worldview, we have God that created all things. And God created his creatures, which would be us, with a mind that is rational enough to receive the revelation of God. Okay. This is something that you said can't happen, but you weren't able to defend that. Okay. So God objectively revealed his truth to his creation. We all have a knowledge of God. God revealed himself to Adam in the garden. Even though the Bible says this, I'm not saying this because the Bible says this. This is our biblical worldview, world history. God sent prophets through the ages. God gave us prophecies. God revealed himself in the flesh, in the person of Jesus Christ. God gave us his scriptures, okay? God gave us the Holy Spirit that is revealed throughout humans, that dwells within us as a Christian. God has written his moral law on all of our hearts, even yours, even though you deny him. So over here on my worldview, I have a rich history, a rich proof, a rich line of reasoning, a rich line of evidence. I have exceeded your standard. Okay. And you don't have to accept that. That's fine. But if you want to disagree with all of those proofs and evidences and lines of reasons, then you're making a counterclaim. And so there you go. Like, I've risen to your state. I've risen to your standard.
To be
That was
quite
a corned beef
honest,
burp right there. That was.
to be quite honest, I really didn't hear anything that
What?
qualifies as evidence.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, what I heard was that
Okay.
I do actually have the rational and empirical justification that, like, and I do
Really?
have some kind of belief in God, and I'm just not aware of it, or I'm repressing it,
Mhm.
or that's the claim that I heard, is that God has made it obvious and evident to everybody,
Yeah.
and like everybody has this knowledge of him, but somehow I'm just either not consciously aware of it, or
Mhm.
I'm repressing that knowledge. Like
That would
that's
be
what
it.
I heard as your evidence.
Yeah. Well, there was more. I forgot.
Well,
Um,
you said the Bible counts as evidence, and you
yeah, that would
said
be
his
one.
divine
That would be
revelations.
one. That would be one of the many lines of evidence. We also have the heavens that were created by God. The Bible says the heavens declare the glory of
What are the
God.
heavens?
The heavens, like when you look out into the vast, the James Webb Space Telescope, big, beautiful, vast heavens. We have the
Right.
earth.
So is that like differentiated lines of evidence, or is that like
Yeah,
you're
hold
like
on.
it
Let me.
sounds like
Let
your
me.
worldview is accommodating that, right? Because nothing that's in the James Webb Telescope was predicted or prophesied in the Bible. Like they just said there are stars and things like that the people of that time knew about already. It's not like
Grayson,
they
hold on. Hold
predicted
on.
nebulas or they predicted black holes or something that they didn't know of at the time,
Yeah.
which
Let me.
would constitute evidence. But if you're just saying that the heavens are evidence, I mean they are explainable with the naturalistic lambda CDM model too.
Really, they are. Well, let me finish adding a few more lines of evidence that I forgot, and then while I'm giving these evidence, I want to remind you that that claim that you made, you've already failed to defend. So you know, again, you're making more vacuous statements, but that's fine. But I did ask you if you have a mechanism, a definitive empirical mechanism for determining that these things that we observe are not evidence of God, and you weren't able to defend that. So
Well,
now
fundamentally, you
it's
cannot prove a
fundamentally, yeah.
negative. Like,
What?
that's illogical for you to ask me to prove a negative. Doesn't make any
Well, you're
sense.
begging the question.
How is that begging a question? You
You're
can't prove a
assuming.
negative.
Yeah, no. So yeah, you are presupposing, you are assuming your position, and you are arbitrarily dismissing the biblical worldview, assuming your position, and then suggesting that you don't have a burden of proof for the position that you hold in violation of your own criteria. Like, this is really bad for you. But
Well,
let
the
me let
burden
me
of proof is
yeah, hold
demonstrated
on,
by
Grayson.
empiricism and rationalism.
That's vacuous. But let me finish. No, look. When you watch this again, hopefully, you know, maybe you shouldn't be paying attention to chat. Like, these people aren't going to help you. But let me explain. Okay, I forgot to mention that we have all of the heavens. Okay, God created the heavens. Apple created my cell phone, right? I don't know what's in here, but the further I look, the further I'm going to find stuff that Apple made. Weird stuff. I don't even know what it is or does. It's crazy, but it's neat. I can communicate all around the world. I can, like, hit a couple buttons and lose money on.
So that's actually perfect. That's actually perfect, because
Hold
if
on. Let me
somebody
two
were
more
to
things.
if
Two more
somebody were to
things.
make the claim,
Two more
wait, if
things.
somebody
Two
were to
more
make the
things.
claim to me, right?
Grayson. Grayson.
Wait, if somebody were to make the claim that, hey,
Okay.
Apple made this phone, and if
Mhm.
I'd never heard of this thing and I didn't know
Yeah.
about phones or apples, and I said, huh, well, that's a claim. Could you justify it? And then they
Well,
said, sure,
yeah.
here's
Yeah.
the phone, and
Yeah.
here's the schematics that Apple sent me. So these are
Okay.
Apple schematics of what's inside the phone. These are predictions for what you should find if you take that phone apart. And then I take the phone apart and I see that the schematics match what Apple said should be there. So that is evidence that Apple really did manufacture that phone. So that would count as evidence. That would count as empirical justification.
Okay. So let me just give you these other lines of evidence,
Okay.
and then I can point out that you're still begging the question because you just don't get it. But that's fine. Aside from the heavens, we have the sea, all that is in them. God says that He made the heavens and the earth and the seas, and all that is in them. So that would be everything. Okay. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that means that God would be the causal origin. My model, my worldview, I have a causal origin, and I know what it is, and it's God. Okay. And so that's me over here. And my on my worldview, God, an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent God that is revelatory, has revealed to His creation that He created all things. So, you know, I can explain life from non-life on my worldview. You talked about having some sort of documentation, and you invoked another line, another standard of criteria, which was some sort of like a revelatory mechanism to where you can see things. And I have that over here. I have the revealed word of God. Was that arbitrary? Do you have that? Because, you know, you keep invoking these things for a worldview. You're like, hey, look, a worldview should be held by this standard. And I'm like, cool. Look, I have a Bible, and I can open it up, and that's God, and I have that revelation, that thing that has the logo on it that says that what we should find. The Bible has an epistemology, which we were talking about earlier. Okay, because the mind of God secures all things, objectively reveals things that we can't be wrong about. Now, you want to deny that? That's great. But now you've tanked into a sea of mysticism where you can't know anything. You've said as much. At a fundamental level, you said you could be wrong about anything. And then you contradicted yourself when you said that objective truth doesn't exist. Is that an objectively true statement?
Yeah. Okay. So you brought up a ton of points.
Yeah,
Most of them
metaphysics.
were just
We'll go to we have metaphysics,
hold
we
on,
have
hold on, hold on.
epistemology, and we have ethics. Those
Yeah.
are the
So
three. So we can do those.
most of that was just a God of the gaps argument. You bringing
No,
up the cause of the
no.
universe and
Hold
the
on,
origin of
hold on.
life again and again. That's just God of the gaps.
Yeah, that's a cliche, Grayson. That's an atheist cliche.
Well, it's true, isn't it? I mean, you're just bringing up gaps in our scientific understanding and saying, like, look, we have answers for these, and you don't have answers for them. But like, so what? Does it matter that I have a causative
Grayson, what is God of the gaps?
explanation for the universe or not?
What is God of the gaps?
It's when you use the gaps of our current scientific understanding to try to insert God.
Okay. Is that what I've done?
Yeah, you've continuously brought up abiogenesis and the origin of the universe.
Okay, look.
To try to invoke God.
Yeah. So here I'm gonna address that, and that's if that's a genuine comment that's never been addressed before, then that's fair. Okay, I'll address that. But ironically, I'm going to show how that is projection, and that's what you're doing. Okay.
Okay.
So, okay, and here's why. Because when there's a gap in your understanding, you appeal to naturalism, and that is naturalism of the gaps. The difference is on my worldview, I am. Yeah, you can shake your head, but this is.
We have evidence to support that every previous explanation has been naturalistic. So that's an empirical basis of why we would think and look for a naturalistic explanation, because of an empirical demonstration that every single past explanation has been naturalistic in nature once we've learned about it. Like there's nothing that has been a gap in our knowledge that then when we found out about it, we learned was actually supernatural. There's no example of that.
Yeah, you're just begging the question.
How?
Because you weren't able to defend. You keep reformulating the same statements. But I've asked you to unpack. I've asked you to defend them, and you haven't been able to do that. But let me explain I want to address your God of the gaps, because this is important for two reasons. Okay, the first reason why it's important is because I'm just tired of hearing it, but. The reason why this is important, because it is a fundamental misrepresentation of the biblical worldview. Okay, on the biblical worldview, Grayson, we start with the truth of the revelation of God. That's our starting point. We're not starting from some independent axiom, like you say, or presupposition or whatever, and then using God to fill in the blanks. The reason why I have a consistent ethical, metaphysical, and epistemological framework is because I am starting with the truth of the revelation of God. I am not using God to fill in the gaps. God is that primary, ultimate, fundamental thing. Now, and I've given you my justification. You've dismissed it arbitrarily. You haven't given me any rational or empirical lines of reasoning of why you've dismissed it. You've given me incredulity, and you continue to beg the question, which is fine. But then ironically, you immediately got to the gap, abiogenesis and a causal origin, which I've already granted you that. I've made that clear. I don't care about those things. You can have your worldview. You can have all of your beliefs. It's just vacuous. I've shown you that now.
So what you just explained was you literally begging the question and starting with the presupposition that God exists, which is definitionally begging the question, which was what you accused me of doing like 50 times.
Okay.
And like when somebody makes a claim, right? If somebody makes a claim to me, right? If I ask them to justify that claim, that is not me making a claim that their claim is false. I'm not claiming the veracity of their claim at all to ask for justification of that claim. But your worldview, you've admitted, starts with the presupposition unjustified of the claim of God.
Whoa. That's a serious accusation right there.
That's what I've been hearing from you.
Are you familiar with
start with this? You start with God, and it doesn't need to be justified.
Okay, hold on.
Either empirically or rationally.
Yeah. So hold on a minute. So you know my worldview enough to know that my foundational starting point is unjustified. Now, I want you to be careful here because you've already refuted yourself. Because if you're going to object to an unjustified starting point, then I got news for you, Grayson. I can do that too to you, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Every
So
single
Jason, I want you to give me.
rests.
Hold on. I want you to give me your argument for your rational mind. Better not be circular. Go ahead.
Okay, every single
No, I just want the rational
worldview,
mind
and you
argument.
can ask any logician this, and anyone that uses logic, all logic fundamentally rests on axiomatic presuppositions.
Wait,
You
are
want to
those
say that your axiomatic presupposition is the existence of God, and therefore it doesn't need to be justified. And you're pointing out
I
that
never said
I
that.
also have axiomatic presuppositions in my worldview, which I will readily admit, such as that our own sensory information can be trusted. And I think that that is like, I'm completely okay with making that presupposition because I think every living person makes that presupposition in order to function in reality. So that's fine to make for me. I'm not, but if you asked me to justify that, I would be honest with you and I would say I don't have an empirical or rational justification for that presupposition. And so when I ask you to justify yours, and you want to make all these claims, and I'm begging the question and this and that, and I have no foundation, you want to point out all these holes and you want to point out my presupposition instead of just answering honestly and say that you don't have a rational or empirical justification for your presupposition of God. And that's okay. It's your religious belief.
But Grayson, that's you talking. And you don't know what you're talking about. I didn't tell you what you believe. I told you that I have a starting point, and that starting point is the truth of the revelation of God. And you said you reject it because it was unjustified. I never said it was unjustified, and you never asked for justification.
Yeah, no, I have asked you multiple times in this debate to justify it, and you have not provided any rational or empirical justification. And in the context of this debate, it has gone unjustified because you have not justified it yet.
So, do you know what double standards are?
Yeah.
You know what arbitrariness is?
Sure.
You know what inconsistencies are?
Yeah.
That's all I'm getting from you.
Okay.
Now, if we got to take a breath and like restart for a minute, that'd be cool. But we got so many things on the table. Okay. Now, I told you that my starting point was the truth of the revelation of God. Right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And you rejected that because you said it's unjustified, right?
No, I haven't rejected it. To be clear, all I did was ask, what is the justification for that? That there's nothing inherently rejective about that. All I did was ask you to justify it.
Is that a double standard?
No.
It's not.
No.
So you can justify, and I'm not saying I can't justify it. We'll do that momentarily.
But no, we've already played this game, and you've already said that you've justified it, and all you did was ramble on and preach about like the Bible is justification and how God has justified it to everybody. It's just that not everybody realizes it. Like these are not justifications.
You keep interrupting me. I'm trying to be charitable, but like again, and that's why I started with that little preamble and explain the difference between proof and persuasion. And I understand that you're not persuaded with the proof that I've provided. But what did you bring to the table? Because you continue to invoke a standard for me that you haven't been able to rise to yourself. But let me say one last thing, and then I'll let you get whatever you want out, okay? When I told you that I start with the truth of the revelation of God, you said, you need to justify that or something along those lines, right? And I asked you if that's a double standard because right before you said that, you told me you have all of these axioms that are unjustified. That's a double standard, Grayson. You're saying, hey, look, me over here, I have a naturalistic worldview. It's my belief that I can explain reality without God. And I'm like, cool, great. How do you do that? He says, well, I have all of these things that I can't account for. Well, shoot, that's not really a justification. I mean, right? You're like, well, I have all of these axioms that I invoke with no justification. But you over here, Sam, you're going to invoke God and you need to justify your starting point, even though I can't, right? That's a double standard.
So all you're doing at this point is you are trying to poke at like my logical axiomatic presuppositions.
Yeah.
And you're trying to bring up the fact that there are gaps in my worldview, the scientific understanding.
Right.
That's the whole conversation. I feel like you've just been focusing on my presuppositions for a naturalistic worldview, and like logical presuppositions and gaps in our knowledge. But again, like, how is that pertinent at all? I fail to see like why that's even relevant to you in this debate. Like, I'm asking you to justify it, and I already made this explicit. Like, if you're claiming that it's just a fundamental presupposition of yours that doesn't need to be justified, that and you're starting with God, fine, just admit to that. But stop playing this game of trying to turn this back around on my presuppositions, trying to point out gaps in our knowledge. Like, stop playing this game and just admit that God is your starting presupposition, and it doesn't need to be empirically or rationally justified to you for your worldview. I don't see why you can't just admit that.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be true.
But that's what we've been talking about this whole time. You're saying that, like, I've asked you to justify it. If I said that, I've asked you to justify it, and then you play all of these rhetorical games, and then if I say, okay, well then is it just an axiomatic presupposition? Then you say, no, I can absolutely justify it. So then justify it.
Okay. Well, no. Well, yeah, and I will. Just like I give you a bunch of other stuff that you dismissed arbitrarily. But look, I want to be clear, right? You are absolutely right. I am attacking your worldview. I am attacking your philosophy of life, of everything. Okay. But I'm not attacking you, Grayson. Like I've been clear when I came here. Like, I want you to be reconciled with the God you know.
That's fine. My goal, I'm not personally offended by anything that you've said. I haven't taken it as a slight against me personally.
Good. Because I've been, that's my thing. I'm not trying to attack you whatsoever, but I am trying to, do my best to destroy your belief system. And so, and that's why I'm continuing to point that out. It's not rhetoric. Okay. And I'm not, I'm not trying, I just want to make it clear that, and again, like all I've gotten have been double standards and you invoking criteria that you haven't been able to rise to. And I continue to do that. And then you arbitrarily dismiss it.
So
and
what, name a double standard?
That hold on. And then you
demand. Give me an example. What double standard have I employed? You made an accusation that I've been holding things at a double standard. What is the double standard?
Oh, what hasn't been? Well,
just name one example.
Yeah. Okay. So you keep demanding lines of evidence for the worldview that I hold, but you haven't provided a single one for yours. And I've given you a bunch. You continue. No. You can arbitrarily.
I said my worldview was based on empiricism, right? So that is obviously like evidence leads the worldview. The worldview is determined by the evidence.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So what is your evidence that everything is not evidence of God? Positively,
you're asking me to prove a negative again, dude.
Well, that's a cop-out.
No, it's not. You literally logically cannot prove a negative. That's a fundamental like fallacy.
So I mean that's a claim, right? So what you're saying is your worldview is indefensible.
No,
and you have no rational justification.
That doesn't make what you just said does not make my worldview indefensible. You asked me to prove a negative that everything in the universe is not evidence for God, which isn't a part of my worldview. My worldview does not rest on that, right? Like, you're asking me to prove a negative, which is a logical fallacy, and then you're trying to make it like some sort of victory that, like, oh, you've defeated my worldview because I can't disprove your worldview.
Well, either you haven't disproven mine or proven yours. But I'm giving you the proofs. You're just hand waving them away.
You haven't given me any proofs yet. Please give me the proofs.
Well, no, I've given you Yeah, well, let me just go through this. I don't know if I'm just being redundant and we need to move on, but
Well, look,
but no,
before we move on,
I've
let's just
given
get
you
the
the
proofs.
heavens,
Let's
I've
get
given
the
you the earth,
proofs.
I've given
People
you
want
the
the proofs.
seas, I've given you Revelation, I've given you the Bible, I've given you the prophets, I've given you Jesus in the flesh, I've given you God walking with man. I've given you. We can deal with epistemology. You've already failed on epistemology. It's fundamentally contradictory. You said you can't have no objective truth, but then you're making a statement that if that statement is objectively true, then you do know at least one thing to be objectively true, and objective truth exists. But if that statement is false, well, then it turns out that it's false. So that's fun to. Really, how can you speak intelligibly about anything if at a fundamental level you can't know anything?
All my knowledge
On one
claims.
hand, you're invoking I can know these things. On the other hand, you're invoking not I can't really know anything.
All
So
my
that's
knowledge
contradictory.
claims are provisional.
Uh,
They are based, like they can
oh
be
no,
changed if new
oh, look at that.
evidence comes to light.
No. So that's another
Yes,
claim. Okay. Well,
I
want
can
you to
make
sidetrack.
claims that are as
I
like
want you.
the closest claims that I can make to objective claims
Mhm.
are claims that are based like around empiricism or like objective reasoning, evidence or reasoning, right? I can be 99.99999% sure of something. That's as
Oh,
good as I'm going to be able to get to an objective
wow.
claim of anything.
That's a lot of
It's a provisional knowledge,
Wow,
right? It's all based on the evidence
yeah.
or the theoretical framework, which can change.
Mhm.
Like that's why it's provisional.
Right.
It leaves open the possibility. That's what makes science unique compared to other knowledge systems.
Mhm. And I've granted you all of that, and you're just repeating cliches. And I'm not saying
Okay.
that to be mean.
So I think that we're
I'm not.
going in circles.
Okay, all right.
So I just
Let me move on.
want to hear the proofs and the
All right.
justifications.
All right.
And all I've heard so far is the Bible, the prophets in the Bible,
Yeah.
the story of Jesus in the Bible, the prophecies of the Bible. It all goes back to the Bible. So that's your main proof or justification for God, right?
So you're straw manning now. And you're making another claim that you can't defend. You need to stop doing that. Okay. The Bible is one line of evidence. Is the heavens the Bible?
No.
Is the seas the Bible?
No.
Okay. Or were the prophets the Bible?
Well, they're only described in the Bible.
So you realize that, like, even at the time that these prophecies were written, these books were not accumulated and collected into that collection of 66 books that we now call the Bible. Like these books were at one time all independent historical records, which even your secular camp doesn't dismiss that there have been numerous and continual archaeological facts that line up with the Bible, among many other things.
Okay,
I mean,
are there archaeological facts that line up with the Quran?
Well, so what you're doing?
There are, right? There are archaeological facts that line up with the Mahabharata in Hinduism. Does that mean that all those holy texts are all true?
Yeah. So I'm happy to address all of those red herrings. Okay. But those aren't your worldview. Okay.
True. Yeah, I'm not Muslim or Hindu.
So your worldview is held coherently and rationally, right? So you don't need to appeal to these other cliches. And so what I'm saying is, when it comes to the Bible,
I'm using them to poke holes in your reasoning.
But they're not, though.
That's literally your reasoning for why the Bible is true. Is you were listing out all these archaeological finds that are in line with it, and I'm saying that same logic would apply to the Quran and the Mahabharata and numerous other holy texts.
Fine. I'll address that then. We're getting sidetracked. But so, Grayson, would that be a non sequitur fallacy?
No.
Does it follow that because there are numerous counterfeit Mona Lisa paintings that there's not an original? Does it follow that because there is confusion about what God, or there are counterfeit gods, or counterfeit currencies or counterfeit paintings, does it follow that there is not an original? Or is it more rational to believe that because there are all of these counterfeits, that there's at least an original somewhere? That's
Yeah,
called
so I think it's a faulty analogy. I
That's
don't
an
think that it's
atheist cliche,
analogous because the Mahabharata and the Quran are not like counterfeits of the Bible.
Okay.
They're making claims that have been archaeologically verified that are not made in the Bible. Like there are place names, cities, events that are depicted in the Quran and in the Mahabharata that have independent archaeological verifications, like at sites actually in India and Arabia. So they're independent of claims in the Bible. You're trying to say, oh, these are just counterfeits, and their claims are just evidence of the original's truth. But they're making claims that are verified that are not in the original.
Grayson, like I can go and get a counterfeit Mona Lisa that looks like really close to the original in money. It's a non sequitur. Why are you defending a formally fallacious line of reasoning?
I am using these examples to prove that your reasoning was fallacious in trying to use archaeological findings to justify the validity of the Bible. That is logically fallacious because you can do that, the same kind of logical reasoning for all these other holy texts. That's why your reasoning was not valid.
Grayson, you need to reset. Like, look, I love the conversation.
Okay, wait. I'll be right back. My dog is like howling. I'll be right back. I'll reset.
All right. Well, hello everyone in the chat. I'm gonna zip my screen out for a moment.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. So, no, maybe we should reset because I'm not trying to prove anything to you. Let me back up. I am not trying to persuade you. So the reason why I brought up that the Bible corroborates very nicely with other external lines of evidence is because you are doing I forget the name of it. It is yet another fallacious line of reasoning. It's when you dismiss something because of a bias. Okay. And your own peers don't do that. Like you can maybe say, okay, well, I don't think Jesus was the Son of God. Like that's fair, I suppose. You can say that. But I mean, there are like militant atheist scholars that will even affirm the resurrection. I'm going through this book right now about the resurrection. I'm actually shocked about how ignorant I am. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. I mean, there's atheists that are making stronger arguments for these things than I do, and I'm embarrassed by that. But so I mean, so again, like I'm not trying to persuade you, or I'm not trying to prove anything to you, because that's not what I'm all about.
So then,
right?
okay,
but hold on.
Wait. Okay, so if you're not trying to do all that, then do you feel like we have addressed what you came on to talk about? Also, I just want to say, like, I'm not a mythicist. I think Jesus was a historical figure. Okay. I would like to see what you're talking about because I have yet to be shown any compelling evidence of the resurrection. So if there is, I would like to see it so that I can look over this supposed historical or archaeological evidence for the resurrection. I'd be interested in that. So if you can send it to me or something.
But there's something I think that I've done a very good job of establishing here with this conversation. Every time you say you haven't received any evidence, it is an entirely vacuous statement that you cannot defend. You've not defended. A single thing is not evidence of God. Your face, your smile, the plant in your yard. When you walk out your door, you look at the plant in your yard. I want to know how that's not evidence of God. You continue to say it's not, but that's all you're doing. You're making claims, but you're not cashing the check, bud. All your checks are blank. Your account's empty. It's bankrupt. Like, what are you doing over there on that your naturalistic worldview? It's empty. You need to
I don't think
repent.
so.
Okay. So well, no, I was going to look up the name of the book that I've got, and like normally I dive down these other rabbit holes, but I recently got oh gosh, Audible, and now I can't find. Oh, there it is, the Audible app, and so I found some book. Oh yeah, the case. It's called the case for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and man, it's who's it
By
by?
whom?
Michael R. Yeah, Gary Habermas, by Gary Habermas. The case for the resurrection of
This
Jesus.
guy is an atheist or a Christian?
Oh, he's a Christian. He's a
Okay.
Christian. Mhm. But I mean, he's like
But I
like,
thought you were saying that these were like atheists that were making better arguments for the resurrection than you.
yeah, he's I think he's pulled over 600 sources from around the world, and he's like laughing. He's like, we don't even need the Bible to prove the resurrection. Like they don't even need the Bible. And then he started explaining why and giving all, and that's why I'm like, yeah, this is hilarious. Like you guys are hilarious. But no offense.
So he's citing atheists that are apparently showing evidence for the resurrection.
Yeah, he's got like a big just a plethora of evidences. So anyway,
you said like militant atheists are making these arguments in favor of the resurrection actually happening.
Yeah, there are. I mean,
so like that confuses me though. So they think that the resurrection happened and it's a historical fact, and Jesus was resurrected from the dead, but they don't. They're still atheists. That's the claim you're making?
Yeah, they don't. Well, just like you, right? Like you.
That's not just like me.
Well, hold on a minute. Let me explain let me explain this, and I'll explain this from on a biblical worldview, okay? Because the Bible says, like you have already acknowledged, that people want to suppress the truth of God, okay? And so when they will take lines of evidence, like I've given you a whole bunch, I've given you everything, and you will naturalize. Yeah, you'll naturalize everything. So these atheists, they'll say, well, yeah, I mean, there is irrefutable evidence for the resurrection, and even the absence of evidence from the people that were totally against Christianity, they didn't refute it, and they were saying like, well, where's the body? And then you have all of the people that Jesus came and visited afterward, and so they're going to say, well, yeah, I don't know, it's a mystery, mysterious thing, but they don't believe that he was God.
So are these
that's where you can land
on it describing all of that? That's all the New Testament, right? I mean, those like you're saying, he met with all these people, he did this, he did that. Like those are not historical texts that you're citing in making those claims. You're citing the New Testament.
Grayson. How did you dismiss all of those historical artifacts as being valid? Is it because you're biased?
Historical artifacts?
The individual books that were compiled to make the New Testament.
So all of the New Testament is what you're saying, like all of the text.
No, I'm just wondering because it seems that you have arbitrarily dismissed the New Testament because of a bias, unless you have something like can you instantiate that the New Testament is not a valid historical document?
Well, are there other historical documents that are not from the New Testament that would corroborate the New Testament's claims about the resurrection?
Well, can you answer my question?
Can you answer my question?
Well, I asked you a question and you dodged and you went on to
ask re-ask your question and then I'll re-ask my question.
Have you somehow falsified the validity of the individual books that have collectively created the New Testament? You haven't.
No, I have.
So those are currently standing as historical independent documents that have been collected into one book, right?
I mean, they are from the period. The Gospels are from like 100 years after Jesus, or like within that first 100 years or so.
Yeah, so
they're from the historical period, but they're not from the time of Jesus's resurrection. They're from decades after that. First of all, but my question now that I've answered your question, that I have not proved the negative,
that's fine,
right?
Yeah. So in
I
addition,
want to ask my question, which was, are there
yeah,
any non-New Testament sources that would corroborate the New Testament's claims about the resurrection?
Grayson,
Yes
there
or no?
are. I'm going to directly answer.
Okay.
There are so many exterior sources independent from the Bible that you can prove the resurrection without the Bible.
Okay, awesome.
There you
Let's
go.
name some.
Boom. Well, like I said, I just started with the book.
Well, yeah, so let's
I
name
gave
one.
you my. Well, I'm not prepared to dive.
But you
Like I
said that there are so many, but you can't name one?
yeah, this is all new to me. This is
Okay.
like a brand new. I literally just said like I didn't want to come and talk. I
So
gave you
then
my source.
would you backtrack on your statement then that there are so many if you're not aware of even one? Would you think maybe
Well,
that
look,
was a little bit of a hasty
hold on.
statement for you to make?
Look, like there are some Christians in the chat, and so they or you could probably do a quick Google search on Gary Habermas sources because he did name them, but I I mean I shouldn't have even have brought it up. Will I backtrack? No, because he lists them. But I'm like, I was working, like I literally just got the app a few days ago. I started listening to the book, and I told you, you go when you watch it again, if you do. I said I was shocked at how ignorant I am about the compelling evidence for the resurrection. Shocked. But no, I wasn't writing these things down as if I was prepared to defend it in a debate. I just wasn't. But I give you the book.
All right, that's fair. That's
You
fair.
can do a search. Yeah, I mean, I'm just.
I think that maybe you shouldn't make claims that you can't provide even one example of. I think that maybe that was a little hasty. Maybe after you read the book, then maybe you can make that claim. But
so wait, yeah, okay.
Maybe
So
it's a little bit hasty before you've read the book to make claims about what's in the book. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I wasn't. So yeah, two things. So I just want to be clear. So what you're saying is you're against vacuous claims now all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, I prefer claims that are justified with evidence or reason.
Can you defend your worldview with evidence and reasons?
Yes.
Well, I'd love to hear them.
Okay. What do you want to know? What do you want justified about my worldview?
How you determine that everything isn't evidence of God?
How I determine that how I prove a negative? Again, you go back to these like these incoherent questions. Like if you want evidence that would support any like of the scientific models that are the current consensus, there's lots of evidence out there for most scientific models that are like theories. Theories typically have associated evidence with them. They are reified hypotheses, and hypotheses get reified with evidence. So scientific theories have evidence to support them. So I would point to any of those evidences if you're going to ask me to justify any of the claims of scientific knowledge that I would make.
Grayson, would that evidence be arbitrary in the context of a worldview analysis?
No.
It wouldn't be begging the question?
No.
The nature of
empiricism is basically letting the evidence lead.
Okay.
I mean, you're looking at what is most in line with the evidence.
All right.
Which model makes testable, falsifiable predictions that are in line with the evidence is the model that is reified and becomes closer to scientific knowledge.
I feel like we just backtracked all the way to the beginning of this conversation when I explained to you that everyone has a worldview, and from that worldview they interpret the data, and I granted your worldview, and I granted you your interpretation.
And how did I respond?
That your interpretation makes sense of the data, because from where you're at, it totally does. But from where
my response to that, and I guess we can wrap it up here because we've almost been going on for an hour and a half, but my response to that, the first time you brought it up, was that not all interpretations are equal. Not all interpretations are equally valid or have the same value in light of the empirical evidence, right? That was my main point. I think that my central claim here is that a naturalistic worldview is more in line with the available evidence than the creationist
Yeah.
worldview is.
So I'm gonna say this, and then you can have the last words, and then we'll move on. So what you're saying is that a naturalistic interpretation of the evidence makes the most amount of sense from a naturalistic worldview. Shocker, right?
I think you're
And you
trying
have
to
an opinion.
imply
You said
that I'm
that too.
doing
Hold
it
on,
like
hold on. You also said you have an opinion. You said naturalistic interpretation of the evidence makes the most sense on naturalism, and I have an opinion about naturalism. That's all you said, Grayson. You said
so
nothing
you're
else.
trying to make it sound like I'm doing some sort of circular like reasoning with this. But if I literally just
Yeah,
restate your objection back to you, and I would just say that in your worldview's interpretation of the evidence, this is all consistent in your worldview.
right.
And you
Yeah,
think that that's some sort of gotcha
right.
to point out that that's some kind of circular reasoning, but
Yeah.
it's not.
Okay. So, yeah, that's like saying the sky is blue, and my worldview is true because the sky is blue.
I don't think that it's
Yeah,
equivalent
that's
to
all you're
saying
saying.
that.
But it's fine. We'll move on. Look. I know we've covered a lot, and maybe we've kind of lost the end goal. So what we were doing is let's reset. Now you said that that you have some axioms, and those axioms are unjustified, right?
Yep.
And you're okay with that. You accept that, right?
Every
On your side of the
single
screen.
every single worldview, every single
No, sir.
logical
Stop.
system
Don't do that. You
has
can't do
to
that.
have axiomatic presuppositions. Every single one of them. If you ask any philosopher of logic or any logician, they will tell you this.
You shouldn't do that.
Do what?
Continue to make statements about. I mean, you're making universal statements. So you've examined every single worldview.
Come on, are you just pointing out like Hume's problem of induction now? Is that
No,
what
sure,
you're
but
going?
really, like, look, like Grayson, you shouldn't say, you shouldn't be. You're being arbitrary. Like I can do that too. I can say every single worldview, this, that, and the other, but it's not. You need to. That's like rhetoric.
Well,
It's
if you can show me even one that
okay.
does not have any axiomatic presuppositions, then
Mhm.
I would be wrong, wouldn't I? But if you can't show that, then the evidence is in line with my claim.
Okay. So when it comes to an axiom, okay, do axioms, are they circular by nature?
Sure, yeah. I mean, they're unjustified.
Or are they viciously circular?
I don't know, man. Why are you adding adverbs or adjectives?
Well, because if it's the case that there is a worldview that does not have a viciously circular axiom, then not all axioms, not all worldviews would have the same type of axioms, like you stated. So that would be another claim that you've made that would be false.
I already told you that not all worldviews are created equal. They are not all equal on the same footing. Like there are some worldviews that are more justified than others, or that are more reified by the evidence than others.
Okay. And so how many axioms do you think you have on your
I don't
worldview?
know, man.
You don't?
No.
Would it be a lot?
I have no idea. Honestly, I do not spend my days thinking about like epistemology.
Well, that would be one axiom. Well, that would be many axioms.
Okay, man. Whatever you say. I'm not going to go through all of the axioms from which I build my logical system. I mean, I'll leave that to logicians. I'm not trained in philosophy.
Well, I'm not either.
Okay. Well, you seem to like it a lot more than I do. Typically, I like to debate the science and the evidence. But when I do these debates, I always see you in the comments trying to poke holes at my epistemology and say how I can't really know that, or how atheists can't make objective truth claims because blah, 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 blah. And I'm just trying to have this conversation now to say that we can make like truth claims based on empiricism and rationality. And that's totally fine. And those are not in conflict with each other. And there's like, that is how science is done. That is how scientific knowledge is accumulated. That's the point of why I had this conversation. And I think that I've proven that point. And I think that I've kind of shown that a lot of your arguments are like absurd or silly or just kind of pointless. And
what was an
the
absurdity
justifications that you claim to be able to provide are similarly vacuous as those that you accuse others of having.
Well, that's a claim. Okay. So what would be something that I've said that was absurd? And then I'll be happy. Then I'll be happy to justify my start. It's just, you know, you continue to speak for my worldview falsely when you make statements that all other worldviews, because that would include mine, right? So you're speaking for my worldview, and you've shown that you've known very little about it. And so and when I ask you if you've studied all other worldviews, I mean, I wonder how much you would know about all these other worldviews. And to be honest, and this isn't a jab at you, Grayson, again, like, I'm not trying to trap you, dude. Okay. I just want you to, again, I just want you to be reconciled with the God that you clearly know. Okay. But
I don't study other worldviews. Like, I don't, like, I'm not that interested in all these like new agey type spirit reincarnation views, or like these evangelical Christians or these Muslim views or Hindu views. I mean, I'm not super interested in all like comparative religion or in people's worldviews of how they view the world. What I'm interested in is the scientific evidence. I'm not even that interested in philosophy or epistemology. I'm really interested in science. That's what I like to have most of my conversations about. And I think that when you look at the totality of evidence, it is very clearly on one side of this argument.
It's look, Grayson, when you make that statement, like it's arbitrary. Like,
I think we're going to agree.
All you're saying is I have a worldview and I interpret things in light of my worldview. That's all you're saying. Every time you make that statement, that's all you're saying. You're just saying, I have an opinion. That's all you're saying. It doesn't mean anything more than that.
I don't think that my opinion changes the weight of the evidence. I think that the evidence, and I know you're going to say, oh, it's a reification fallacy. It's a figure of speech. The evidence speaks for itself.
Oh,
the evidence is clearly on one camp and not the other.
Yeah.
Regardless of what my opinions about the evidence are. Like, the evidence exists. It's not just something that is like totally dependent on your interpretation. You can have like a worldview, and then you can be presented with evidence that is clearly contrary to worldview, your worldview. And then what you do at that point is either deny the evidence or you change your worldview according to the evidence. Dude.
It's exactly what you did. And the reason why I say that, like, we could summarize your whole comment right there that you said by just in two sentences. I have a worldview and I have an opinion. I don't think you get it. Like, that's your.
I don't think you get it.
No, Grayson. Look. Let's just hypothetically say that you had a Damascus Road experience. You know what that is?
Yeah, Saul of Tarsus having his revelation, becoming Paul, converting to Christianity.
Yeah. So let's say that happened, right?
Uh-huh.
And this happens all the time. Like Dr. John Sanford, excellent example.
I would convert.
Brilliant mind, right?
If that happened to me, I would convert.
Yeah. So Dr. John Sanford is one of, and don't attack the example. I'm just throwing this out there for fluff, okay? So Dr. John Sanford was an atheist, making the same comments you are. But then he had a worldview change. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Just that's it. So you have a worldview and you have an opinion, and that's it. That's why I don't care about I should take that back. I do care about like the science debates that you have, because I'm not saying that you're wrong, okay? That that it's important. Like, you can't be like so fringe that, right? And you think that we are. I get it, right? You're like, you creationists, you guys are so fringe. But But much like our conversation, it's because you're not actually accepting our position. You're doing an external critique. You're throwing rocks on the outside. Like you've not once represented what I believe, so you're straw manning. And so and I like those because I think they're good. But at the end of the day, Grayson, at the end of the day, you have a philosophy and you interpret the data through your philosophy and you have an opinion. And
So
that's
here's the
all
difference, right?
all you're saying.
So here's the difference, right? Is that you're saying that the evidence that we have is the same. The only thing that's different is our interpretation of the evidence. But what I want to say, okay, is that there is evidence that can be contradictory to different interpretations, right? If I have an interpretation and then I find evidence that directly contradicts that, then either I deny the evidence or I change my worldview. Okay. So I want to hear it from you. Is your worldview, like, can it be contradicted? Is it even possible for there to be evidence that contradicts your worldview? Is that even possible?
So you're saying that no.
Because me personally, I think that things in the Bible, like the flood myth or Adam and Eve, the evidence is directly contradictory to that. But I want to hear it from you. Do you think it's even possible that there could be because you say everything in the universe counts as evidence? So I want to know, like, is there anything that you would say could be contradictory to your worldview? Because personally, I think that there is things that are at least contradictory to the flood and to Adam and Eve and some of these things. I'm not saying that there's evidence that's contradictory to the existence of God, but I'm saying that there is evidence that's contradictory to some of the stories in the Bible that are like the flood and Adam and Eve. So I don't want to repeat myself. I know I've been doing that, so I'll just let you talk.
Yeah. So okay. So first of all, like, I keep asking you, like, you really need to stop making comments like that, because you would come off far more intellectually honest. Like for example, right? Like Mark Reed, he's a pretty smart guy, but he says some really stupid stuff. He really does.
This isn't a debate about Mark.
Huh?
This isn't a debate about Mark. And you say that you don't like giving examples, but you give a ton of examples.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you, right? When you say stuff like flood myth, right? You got, you say like that, you're just begging the question. Like you haven't.
I'll change my words. I'll just say the flood as described in the Old Testament. Would you be happy with that? I'm saying that the evidence is directly contradictory to the flood as described in the Old Testament. That's the claim I'm making. But what I really want to know, the question I was asking is, do you think it's like a yes or no question? Is it possible that there could be evidence that's contradictory to your worldview?
Grayson,
is it possible?
I don't. Maybe you'll watch this again and get it. Like, evidence doesn't speak; it is interpreted from a worldview. So there's no such thing when you say that there is evidence that is contradictory. Your interpretation of the geological column is contradictory to my interpretation of the.
Okay, wait. You admitted. I thought that we agreed that I'm not saying this is for your worldview. I'm just saying for worldviews in general, that there can be evidence that is contradictory, that cannot be accommodated by someone's worldview. I'm not saying your worldview, but just in general, that can happen, right? We would agree with that.
Let's have that. Let's have that conversation. So let's just pause. Let's just stop right. So, okay, let me answer you first. I don't want to dodge. And I have to be careful the way that I answer this question, because you have to understand that when you're gonna have to bear with me. You give me a little bit to unpack this, okay, without interrupting me, and then write it down. But please don't interrupt my train of thought, and you can address whatever you want. So you're in a sense, you're invoking a type of falsification criterion, and you're asking essentially if my worldview could meet that criteria. So, but that's not my criteria. Okay. And that's a complex question. So on one hand, yes, Christianity could have very well been falsified. And, for example, if they would have found the body of Jesus, Christianity would have been falsified. So there are historical things that could have hypothetically falsified Christianity. That said, okay, if something is true, and I know you said which is a contradictory statement. I've already addressed that. But if something is, let me rephrase this. If something is objectively true, okay? If there is a thing called objective truth, for the sake of this discussion with you, if there is a thing called objective truth, and if something is objectively true, how can that be falsified? It's objectively true, right? So when we're talking about Christianity, my position is that Christianity is an indispensable, objectively true claim, and the evidence of that would be the denial of the self-identity claims, the instantiation of the denial of the self-identity claims of Jesus Christ would result in absurdity on the terms of the person making that claim.
Okay, so you said, how can something that's objectively true be falsifiable?
That would
So
be a contradiction. Be false.
It's true that the sky is blue, right? So that's falsifiable. If you go outside and you look up and the sky is red, then my statement was falsified. Even though it's true, the sky is blue. You can go look it up. That's a falsifiable statement. It could have been falsified if you went out and it wasn't blue.
We're not talking about that. We're not talking about.
But you said objectively true things can't be falsified.
No. Listen. If it is the case that something is objectively true, whatever that thing is, okay? If something is objectively true, can it be falsified?
Yeah.
No, Grayson.
Yes. If I
that's
say
a contradiction.
Okay, wait. 2
that's
plus
a contradiction.
2 is 4, right? 2 plus 2 is 4, right? That's objectively true.
Grayson, focus, dude.
No,
focus.
That's what I'm doing is focusing. You said
no, you're not focusing.
Yes, if 2 plus 2 equals 4, is that statement falsifiable? Yes, it is. You could do the math. If it doesn't add up, then it's falsified.
If something is objectively true, it cannot be falsified.
Doesn't make any sense.
Because it is objectively true.
It doesn't make any sense to me, man.
You shouldn't argue with this. You should agree with me on this. I'm serious. This isn't something you should argue with. If something is objectively true, then it cannot be falsified. It's objectively true.
I really don't understand your logic for that, man. I really don't.
Grayson, look, man, if it could be falsified, then it was never objectively true. We're not talking about can we put a type of criterion on it. You can add your falsification criteria to it. But if that thing becomes falsified, it was never true. So it was never objectively true. But on the other hand, if there is something that is objectively true, whatever that is, it can't be falsified, even with that criteria. You can add all the criteria you want, okay? It will never be falsified because it is objectively true. It would be
okay. So you're just saying that it would no longer be in the category. Like, so you're making a difference between something that's claimed to be objectively true and something that really is
actually the case. There you go.
Okay, well, sure. I guess definitionally, I'll grant you that. But the thing is that
there you go.
For something to be objectively true, somebody's got to claim that it's objectively true, and that claim can be falsified.
Yeah, and so let's roll with this. Now, this is part.
Well, hey, wait. I just want to say, I'm glad that we actually agreed on a point and can move on smoothly.
No. Look. It. By the way, like I love talking about God. I really, really do. And so And
I don't very
I
much, to
think,
be honest.
huh?
I like talking about science, but if
Okay.
you'll notice on this channel, I think this is the first conversation I've done actually about God directly and not about science.
Okay,
So,
cool. I think
you
it's
should
gonna
feel a
be
little bit honored with that because I did
yeah.
want to have this conversation. But normally, I don't really go for this kind of conversation because I'm much more interested in the science.
Yeah, that's fine. But you know what? I think I think it's been a really good conversation. And I think that maybe like because we're kind of in butt head mode, I think that we agree on more of what I said than you realize yet. And I could be wrong. You'll have to let me know later. But I don't think that we disagree as much as you think. Okay. So now when it comes to that starting point on Christianity, we wouldn't call that an axiom. So we are assuming the semi reliability of our senses. Now, if you want on your worldview affirm the reliability of your senses, look. I'm not even going to go there with your worldview. Okay, so look on Christianity, where we are our starting presupposition, our semi starting presupposition is the semi reliability of our senses. And from that point, we realize that God is a necessary being. Okay, and so there is not a vicious circularity there because I'm not saying my senses because of my senses. I'm not appealing to something in a vicious circle. Okay, I'm saying my senses because God has all of these omni properties, and he has created these creatures in a way to receive this revelation of God. And can I be wrong with my senses? And now we're going to get into like an epistemological scenario where
That's
if
where
you
it gets circular, no? Because I see it as being circular, where you're saying, okay, so I can rely on my senses because like God has revealed himself to me through my senses, and I can rely on those
no,
senses because God has revealed himself. It seems circular.
yeah, that's because maybe I'm not articulating well enough, or maybe because and I want you to disagree with me, but maybe at this point you should try to understand before you disagree. Okay, because when we open our eyes, along with the semi reliability of our mind, we also have the external world, which is the evidence of God. So I'm not waking up and I'm not like having a brain fart and thinking, oh, on the biblical worldview, God created our mind. So when we open up our eyes, we can come to realize that all of these things are evidence of God. And God has given us those other lines of evidence that I gave you that you dismissed, and that's fine. But maybe this will make sense the next time around, that God has given us these other external evidences. And so I'm not appealing to my senses. I'm appealing to the semi-reliability temporarily of my senses to realize that if I deny God, like you have, then I cannot make sense of the external world. And you believe that like the entailment of your position is that you can make sense of the external world. And so one of those things that you're going to need to give an account for with your independence of God is going to be, and so this is the argument, right? So the argument is, I'm all over the map. I apologize. Let me regroup. I'm so used to doing like a worldview comparison. I'm going to stick to mine for a minute. Okay, so on my worldview, God gives us that semi-reliability of our senses. We open our eyes to the external world that God has created, and then we understand this revelation of God. And then we understand that the denial of God would result in absurdity. Okay, that is our worldview. That is the transcendental argument for the necessity of God. Okay, and so somebody and so that's my worldview. That in its like more completeness. And so when it comes to objective truth, we have objective truth. There are some preconditions
Okay,
that
wait. Before you go on into the rest of your worldview,
go ahead.
you said
Go
that
ahead.
you're not presupposing the reliability of your senses. You are temporarily presupposing the semi-reliability of your
Mhm.
senses. I honestly have no idea why there's any functional distinction between those two things.
Yeah, you
I
do.
guess I don't know what you mean by semi-reliability or like temporarily. To me, you absolutely are presupposing the reliability of your senses in order
Yeah.
to talk about the external world or to talk about the revelations from God. All of those things, to me, presuppose the reliability of your senses. Not this semi-reliability, not this temporarily, but just like point blank. So there's the disconnect for me in understanding so far from what you've said.
Well, let me ask you two questions. Okay. Can you be deceived?
Yes, I'm fallible.
Oh, so your senses aren't fully reliable, right?
Sure.
Okay.
But it's a
There you go.
presupposition. I have to act like they are because like
You do.
if I didn't, then I wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be able to have a functional life if I didn't assume that my senses were fundamentally reliable.
But on your, I'll ask you another position, and I'm not trying to press you, but I'm just trying to show you. You asked a question, and the best way for me to show you is by asking you a question. Okay, is the complete reliability of your senses illusory?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know, I guess.
So you don't have an objection. So you actually don't have an objection on my worldview because it would be a straw man. But even if you did have an objection, which I welcome you to bring those, your objection would be self-refuting.
I just don't understand what it means to presuppose the semi-reliability. Like that's not coherent to me. Like
Yeah. Okay.
presupposing the reliability is like sure, it's an unjustified like presupposition that has to be presupposed in order for us to like get anywhere. Like we would just not know anything, and we couldn't even have any discussion of any kind or live in reality if we did not presuppose that.
Yeah. So you would be asking, and this is good, right? Because this is where the transcendental argument, I feel, and there are people that make it far better than me, right? But on your worldview, when you say that you presuppose the reliability of your senses, but at the same time you say that it's an illusion, and the problem is only going to snowball because on your worldview, you have no objective standard of truth because you deny the triune.
Empiricism, rationality.
Well, yeah,
That's as
those are
close to an
vacuous. We've
objective
already been through
standard
that.
as I can
Right,
physically like. That's as close
yeah.
as you can get. Is empiricism and rationality.
Okay, so those are. I mean, look, okay. Those are vacuous. We've already been through that.
Okay, I think, hey man, I think we're going in circles now. We're approaching the 2-hour mark, and my mind is gonna explode. So if you want to make any other like closing remarks or whatever, at this point, honestly, I think I'm good. I think my patience is just about at that point where I'm just cool to call it and have a good evening. So if you want to make any closing remarks, you're free to do so.
Okay, cool. Before I do, let's give it some time, and let's do, because I know your channel isn't, geared towards this, but let's do a round two, and we'll try to pick up where with the burden of proof fully on me. I'll accept that worldview challenge, and you can challenge my worldview, and I will make that argument and show that the denial of the triune God results in absurdity on the person who rejects specifically the God of Christianity, which would also be the answer of how not only we know that there is a God, but it is specifically and only the triune God of Christianity. And I have an argument for that too.
Okay. Yeah, sure. That sounds like an interesting conversation. Okay. So I'd be happy.
All right. Yeah. And so that said, look, I've made my intentions clear, Grayson. I want you to be reconciled with the God who loves you, and that's about it. And I was, I don't even know why I don't come on critics' channels like ever, really. So,
well, hey, I'm glad that you did come on because we've had lots of like text-based exchanges on the live chats. So I'm glad that we could actually have like a one-on-one. And the last discussion we had was like getting interrupted constantly by the other people on the panel. Yeah. So I felt like it was an interesting enough conversation where it did justify having a more one-on-one, like casual, like where we're not actually getting interrupted and we could both like speak and hear each other's points out. So I'm grateful for you for coming on the channel, and I'm thankful for all of the audience that was here listening to us today. So Thanks a
All
lot,
right.
Sam. It was good
Look,
talking with you today. And yeah, have a good rest of your week, everybody.
all right. You too. See ya.